We're going to take care of those babies for 70, 75, 80, 90 years? I don't think so.
Ms. Fiorina, the vast majority of countries do not have birthright citizenship. Donald Trump is right about that. Why is it pandering when he says this?
First, let me say we have just spent a good bit of time discussing as Republicans how to solve this problem. I would ask your audience at home to ask a very basic question. Why have Democrats not solved this problem? President Obama campaigned in 2007 and 2008 on solving the immigration problem. He entered Washington with majorities in the House and the Senate. He could have chosen to do anything to solve this problem. Instead, he chose to do nothing. Why? Because the Democrats don't want this issue solved.
Ms. Fiorina,
they want it to be an issue that they can use. As to birthright citizenship,
please.
The truth is you can't just wave your hands and say the 14th Amendment is going to go away. It will take an extremely arduous vote in Congress, followed by 2/3 of the states. And if that doesn't work to amend the Constitution, then it is a long, arduous process in court. And meanwhile, what will continue to go on is what has gone on for 25 years. With all due respect, Mr. Trump, we have been talking about illegal immigration for 25 years. San Francisco has been a sanctuary city since 1989. There are 300 of them. And meanwhile, what has happened? Nothing. The border remains insecure. The legal immigration system remains broken. Look, we know what it takes to secure a border. We've heard a lot of great ideas here. Money, manpower, technology, mostly, apparently, leadership, the kind of leadership that understands how to get results.
Thank you, Ms. Fiorina. Mr. Trump, I want to give you a chance to respond.
By the way, with Carly on the fact that the Democrats do not want to solve this problem for the obvious reasons, but they do not. But I believe that a reading of the 14th Amendment allows you to have an interpretation where this is not legal and where it can't be done. I've seen both sides, but some of the greatest scholars agree with me without having to go through Congress. If you do go through Congress, you can absolutely solve the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
You would
Senator
stipulate,
Paul,
Mr. Trump, that not everyone agrees with you.
That's true, sure.
Senator Paul, I want to bring you in. Where do you stand on the issue of birthright citizenship?
Well, I hate to say it, but Donald Trump has a bit of a point here. The case that was decided around 1900 was people had a green card, were here legally, and they said that their children were citizens. There's never been a direct Supreme Court case on people who are here illegally, whether or not their kids are citizens. So it hasn't really been completely adjudicated. The 14th Amendment says that those who are here and under the jurisdiction. The original author of the 14th Amendment said on the Senate floor that this was applying to slaves and did not specifically apply to others.
All right, Senator Paul, thank you so much. Let's turn to a new topic. We've received a lot of questions on social media about the economy and about jobs. We have two CEOs on stage right now. Ms. Fiorina, you were CEO of Hewlett-Packard. Donald Trump says you, quote, ran HP into the ground. You laid off tens of thousands of people. You got viciously fired. For voters looking to somebody with private sector experience to create American jobs, why should they pick you and not Donald Trump?
I led Hewlett-Packard through a very difficult time, the worst technology recession in 25 years. The NASDAQ stock index fell 80%. It took 15 years for the stock index to recover. We had very strong competitors who literally went out of business and lost all of their jobs in the process. Despite those difficult times, we doubled the size of the company. We quadrupled its top-line growth rate. We quadrupled its cash flow. We tripled its rate of innovation. Yes, we had to make tough choices. And in doing so, we saved 80,000 jobs, went on to grow to 160,000 jobs, and now Hewlett-Packard is almost 300,000 jobs. We went from lagging behind to leading in every product category and every market segment. We must lead in this nation again, and some tough calls are going to be required. But as for the firing, I have been very honest about this from the day it happened. When you challenge the status quo, you make enemies. I made a few. Steve Jobs told me that when he called me the day I was fired to say, hey, been there, done that twice. It's also true that the man that led my firing, Tom Perkins, just took out a full-page ad in the New York Times to say he was wrong, I was right, I was a terrific CEO, the board was dysfunctional, and he thinks I will make a magnificent president of the United States.
Well, Mr. Trump, why would you be better at creating jobs than Carly Fiorina?
Well, let me just explain. The head of the Yale Business School, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, wrote a paper recently, one of the worst tenures for a CEO that he has ever seen, ranked one of the top 20 in the history of business. The company is a disaster and continues to be a disaster. They still haven't recovered. In fact, today on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, they fired another 25 or 30,000 people, saying we still haven't recovered from the catastrophe. When Carly says the revenues went up, that's because she bought Compaq. It was a terrible deal, and it really led to the destruction of the company. Now, one other company before that was Lucent. Carly was at Lucent before that. And Lucent turned out to be a catastrophe also. So I only say this. She can't run any of my companies. That I can tell you.
Ms. Fiorina, I want to give you a chance to respond.
Jeffrey Sonnenfeld is a well-known Clintonite and honestly had it out for me from the moment that I arrived at Hewlett-Packard. But honestly, Mr. Trump, I find it quite rich that you would talk about this. You know, there are a lot of us Americans who believe that we are going to have trouble someday paying back the interest on our debt, because politicians have run up mountains of debt using other people's money. That is, in fact, precisely the way you ran your casinos. You ran up mountains of debt as well as losses using other people's money, and you were forced to file for bankruptcy not once,
I never filed
not
for
twice,
bankruptcy.
4 times, a record 4 times. Why should we trust you
Mr.
to
Trump.
manage
Why.
the
It's very
finances
simple.
of this nation
I tell you,
any differently
I
than you
was
manage
running-
the finances
Carly,
of your casinos?
Carly,
Mr. Trump.
I made over $10 billion. I had a casino company. Caesars just filed for bankruptcy. Chris will tell you, it's not Chris's fault either. But almost everybody in Atlantic City is either in trouble or filed for maybe I'll blame Chris.
Well,
But Atlantic City
Mr. Trump
is
also-
a disaster. Wait a minute, Carly. Wait. I'll let you speak. Atlantic City is a disaster. And I did great in Atlantic City. I knew when to get out. My timing was great. And I got a lot of credit for it. Many of the great business people that you know, and Carl Icahn's going to work with me on making great deals for this country, but whether it's Carl or so many others that we read about all the time,
Thank you, Mr.
they
Trump.
have used the laws of the land, which are the best.
Thank you, Mr.
to make a good
so
deal.
this is-
Governor Christie's name has been invoked. I'd like to give him the 30-second
Jake,
opportunity.
listen, while I'm as entertained as anyone by this personal back and forth about the history of Donald and Carly's career, for the 55-year-old construction worker out in that audience tonight who doesn't have a job, who can't fund his child's education, I got to tell you the truth. They could care less about your careers. They care about theirs. Let's start talking about that on this stage and stop playing the games.
Governor
Stop
Kasich.
playing, John, I'm not done yet, John.
A track record of leadership is not a game. It is the issue in this election.
Carly, listen, you can interrupt everybody else on the stage. You got to interrupt me, okay? The fact is that we don't want to hear about your careers. Back and forth and volleying back and forth about who did well and who did poorly. You're both successful people. Congratulations. You know who's not successful? The middle class in this country who's getting plowed over by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Let's start talking about those issues tonight and stop this childish back and forth between the two of you.
Ms. Fiorina, I want to give you...
Jake.
Governor Kasich, I'm coming to you next, but Ms. Fiorina's name was mentioned, and I have to give her the opportunity to respond if she wants it.
Well, I thought we had been hearing quite a bit about Governor Christie's record as governor. Actually, I think track records are very important. I completely agree that what's at stake here is the future of this nation and the future of every American. But I do think that a track record of leadership is vital because in the end, this election is about leadership. And let's talk about what leadership is. It's not about braggadocio. It is about challenging the status quo, solving problems, producing results, and the highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others.
Thank you.
Problems have festered in Washington for too long, and the potential of this nation is being crushed.
Thank you, Ms. Fiorina. Governor Kasich, I want to come to you. I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you. Let me ask the question. You can use it at the time however you want.
Okay, Jay.
Donald Trump says that the hedge fund guys are getting away with murder by paying a lower tax rate. He wants to raise the taxes of hedge fund managers, as does Governor Bush. Do you agree?
I don't at this point in terms of changing the incentives for investment and risk-taking. But let's just stop for a second. There's one person on this stage that does have a record. I'm the only person on the stage and one of the few people in this country that led the effort as the chief architect of the last time we balanced the federal budget. We also cut taxes. And when I left Washington in 2000, we had a $5 trillion surplus and the economy was booming. I'd spent 10 years of my life to get us to that point. went out in the private sector. It was a great experience, and went into Ohio and took an $8 billion hole and turned it into a $2 billion surplus. We've had the largest amount of tax cuts of any sitting governor. We have grown well over 300,000 jobs. You see, I've done it in both places. I'm the only one here that's done it in both places. It took a lot to get us to a balanced budget. It was legitimate, it was real, and we negotiated it. A lot of what we're talking about here tonight is, I'm going to take this position and that position. You know what? At the end of the day, America's got to work. We got to figure out how we come together to deal with this, with our fiscal problems, because when we deal with that, we create a stronger economy for everybody. People have a chance to rise. So, you know, when we think about how we make a choice, it's the person that lands that plane. It's not somebody that talks about it. It's about the person who's done it. And I've done it in both places. And I did it, including people in the other party, and that's how we were successful, and that's how I will be president, using that experience to drive this country forward.
Governor Huckabee, I want to bring you in on the question of hedge fund managers and taxing them. You have said that you are bothered by the fact that hedge fund managers pay such a low tax rate and make 2,500 times what people who work for them make. Do you agree with what Donald Trump and Governor Bush have proposed, raising their tax rates?
I have a different idea. I think we ought to get rid of all the taxes on people who produce. Why should we penalize productivity? And it's why I'm an unabashed supporter of the fair tax, which would be a tax on our consumption rather than a tax on our productivity. In other words, you're not going to tax anybody for what they earn, whether it's a worker who's working by the hour or whether it's a hedge fund manager. If they can produce something and bring capital and labor to create jobs, we need some jobs. And I think the fair tax makes more sense. Now, Jake, I've been listening to everybody on the stage, and there's a lot of back and forth about I'm the only one who's done this, the only one who's done that. I've done great things. We've all done great things or we wouldn't be on this stage. But it occurs to me as we're sitting here in the Reagan Library that most of us would like to pay tribute to a guy who, when he got elected, didn't get elected telling everybody how great he was. He got elected telling everybody how great the American people were, and he empowered them to live their dreams, which is what I'd love to see us do by no longer penalizing the people who are out there working, because they're taking a gut punch right now.
Thank you, Governor. Dr. Carson, you support scrapping the entire tax code and replacing it with a flat tax based on the principle of tithing from the Bible. If you make $10 billion, you pay $1 billion in taxes. If you make $10, you pay $1 in taxes. Donald Trump believes in progressive taxation. He says it's not right that rich people pay the same as the poor. Tell Donald Trump why his ideas on taxes are wrong.
It's all about America. You know, the people who say the guy who paid $1 billion because he had 10, he's still got $9 billion left. That's not fair. We need to take more of his money. That's called socialism. That doesn't work so well. What made America into a great nation was the fact that we said, that guy just put in $1 billion. Let's create an environment that's even more conducive to his success so that next year he can put in $2 billion. And that's the kind of thing that helps us to grow. We can't grow by continuing to take a piece of pie and dividing it and redistributing it. But I'm also looking at what Governor Huckabee talked about.
You don't want me operating on you, I assure you that.
The fair tax. Looking at both of them, we're evaluating them both, and I'm talking to the American people, because one of the things we must recognize is that this country is of, for, and by the people. And it's really time that the government get out of the way and let the people be the ones who decide how they want to run their country.
Mr. Trump, what do you think of the flat? Yes. What do you think of the flat tax? Do you think it's fair?
Well, I think the thing about the flat tax, I know it very well, that I don't like is if you make $200 million a year, you pay 10%. You're paying very little relatively to somebody that's making $50,000 a year and has to hire H&R Block to do the work because it's so complicated. One thing I'll say to Ben is that we've had a graduated tax system for many years, so it's not a socialistic thing. What I'd like to do is, and I'll be putting in the plan in about 2 weeks, and I think people are going to like it, it's a major reduction in taxes. It's a major reduction for the middle class. The hedge fund guys won't like me as much as they like me right now. I know them all, but they'll pay more. I know people that are making a tremendous amount of money and paying virtually no tax, and I think it's unfair.
Thank you, Mr. Trump. Senator Paul.
I'm glad we're having a discussion about taxes because everybody laments that we lose jobs overseas. Well, yeah, our companies and our jobs are being chased overseas by a 70,000-page tax code. So that's why I've chosen